Hello, everybody. It's Brian here, sitting in my basement, as I always do. A little while ago, I was thinking about what would be an interesting topic for a video, and I thought, well, it is hockey season. So, wouldn't it be great to do a video that had songs that are about hockey, one of Canada's national sports? Now, we have two national sports here. The other is lacrosse, but obviously hockey is the more popular one. It's the one where all the money is, but we do have two. Now, for all those colonials who tend to say things like ice hockey, we don't say ice hockey here or in the United States. It's just hockey, so you can drop the ice part. So I chose 6 tracks that are about hockey. There are 2 additional tracks that I would love to have included, but I don't own them on any format. So after this video, if you know what they are, I'd be curious if you do. Put it in the comments. I'll see if you're right. So of the 6 tracks, one is kind of a borderline novelty song. All of them are Canadian except for one song, and there's one band that's represented with 2 songs, and I think you already know who that band is. But let's start with the wackiest one for me, because it's from Warren Zevon. This is his album called My Rides here from 2001. On side 2, there's a track called Hit Somebody, the hockey song. Now, when I bought this record, I didn't know anything about it, and when I flipped over to side B, I was like, why is Warren Zevon singing a song about hockey? Here's the insert for this, by the way. Now, so Hit Somebody, the hockey song, is an interesting track. It's a collaboration. It's co-written by Warren and Mitch Albom, A-L-B-O-M, I think he's a musician, but he's also a sports writer. So I guess that's maybe where the genesis of the song comes from. Let's just go through a bit of the song. So it talks about a guy whose name is Buddy. They call him Buddy in the song. He was born in Big Beaver by the borderline. I don't know where that is. He started playing hockey by the time he was 9. Now, the next line is just a classic Canadian scene, possibly North United States scene as well. His dad took the hose and froze the backyard. Now, this brought back a lot of memories for me, because I hadn't thought about this in a long time. But when I was a kid, we would often freeze the backyard to make an ice rink. My neighbors did it. Some other people did it. And what inevitably happens is that when you do that, the neighborhood kids come over with their skates and their hockey sticks, and some people have nets. And they'd even be out there when you're not even there. You'd just be understood. You'd just skate on a rink if you want to. So it was really cool, and I loved it. Did it a few times, and it was quite fun. In younger days, not so much older. But little Buddy dreamed he was Rocket Richard, famous Montreal Canadiens hockey player. It's not the first time we'll encounter Rocket Richard in this video. So it talks about the fact that he saw himself scoring goals for the Wings or the Canucks, but that he wasn't that good with a hockey puck. His real talent was beating people up. So when he's actually scouted by the Flames, the Calgary Flames, they want him to be an enforcer. Now, there's part of the song that sounds like he's playing international hockey. There were Swedes to the left of him, Russians to the right, a Czech at the blue line looking for a fight, or they're Europeans in the NHL league. It's hard to say. But what's a Canadian farm boy to do? What else can a farm boy from Canada do? Hit somebody was what the crowd roared, because in his career, he becomes the enforcer on the team. He's the protection. He's the guy that would just dole out bruising to people, and they'd end up with stitches. But his goal is to score a goal. That's what he always wanted to do, is score a goal. He wanted to be more than just the enforcer. He wanted to score a goal. And in the end of the song, he does, in fact, score a goal. But after he scores a goal, he gets cold-cocked, and he falls to the ice. So he sees the red goal light go off. He scores his goal. But it seems to be implied in the song that he has died in the process. Kind of a sad song. So, Canadian farm boy in the NHL, I guess. Second track is from Canadian singer called Jane Siberry. This is Bound by the Beauty. Came out in 1989 on Duke Street Records. Some of her early albums, there's some suggestions that she's a bit like Laurie Anderson. That may or may not be true, but by this point, she's not really singing that kind of weird. Meet Me on the Beach, one of her first singles, does have a Laurie Anderson kind of feel, but a little different. Halfway through side A, there's a track called Hockey. And again, this is a track that just, the first 3 lines just bring back so many memories, because it starts with wintertime and the frozen river Sunday afternoon. They're playing hockey on the river. Now that is such a beautiful rural Ontario scene, and I have in fact played hockey on a frozen river. and a frozen pond, always with the worry that the ice is going to give way. But just again, memories of being a kid and playing hockey. Not that I played a lot of hockey and I was never on a team, but that image is just really really great. Now, there is a part where she mentions a stick being signed by John Beliveau, another famous hockey player. And this line I've always loved. They rioted in the streets of Montreal when they benched Rocket Richard, it's true. So yes, the Canadiens benched Rocket Richard, and there was rioting in the streets because of that. Here we have the Duke Street labels. This brings back memories as well because Duke Street Records, very famous Canadian record label. So Bound by the Beauty from Jane Siberry. Next one is maybe the most famous song about hockey ever written in Canada, from the Tragically Hip, from their album Fully Completely in 1992. The track I'm referring to is 50 Mission Cap. I have mentioned this song in a different video. I did a series of videos that were addressing songs about Toronto, and I mentioned this one in some detail. I'll review it here, but I might put a link to it if I can remember to do that. 50 Mission Cap is about Toronto Maple Leafs defenseman Bill Barilko, who in the 1951 Stanley Cup playoff series scored the winning goal over the Montreal Canadiens. So kind of a hero. A few months after that, I think 4 months after that, he took a plane to go on a fishing trip with a friend of his. And somehow I remember the friend was a dentist, I think. Anyway, the plane disappeared, never to be seen from again. So there's this mystery surrounding what happened to Bill Barilko. And the weird symmetry happened. So 11 years later, in 1962, that was the next time the Toronto Maple Leafs won the Stanley Cup, in the same year that his body was discovered quite by accident. So 11 years have passed since the last Stanley Cup, and 11 years have passed since he disappeared. We just finished watching the Tragically Hip documentary called No Dress Rehearsal on Prime. And even if you're not a Tragically Hip fan, I would encourage you to watch it. It is really well done. There's 4 episodes. It is heartbreaking. It follows the band from the early beginnings, their period of fame, and then the tragic death of Gord Downie at age 53. It is heartbreaking to watch that. But there is a section where they talk about this song and how Gord had been flipping through a box of hockey cards. In the song, he says, "I stole this from a hockey card." And this kind of brings it back where he goes up to the microphone. They were jamming in this rehearsal space. He's looking through these hockey cards, and he starts singing essentially the hockey card about how Bill Barilko disappeared that summer. He was on a fishing trip. I stole this from a hockey card. And it's a really interesting genesis of that song. The other component of the song is the idea of the 50 mission cap, where pilots, I believe, in World War II would abuse their flight caps to make it look like they've been on more missions than they had been. That song, 50 Mission Cap, I think is still part of Maple Leafs warm-ups for hockey. And they have in the dressing room a framed, signed, handwritten copy of the lyrics from Gord Downie for that song. So kind of an unofficial anthem of the Toronto Maple Leafs. So really interesting song. From possibly their best album. There's a poster in here of the cover as well. So really, really great song. And again, watch the Tragically Hip documentary. It's just really well done. Now, I chose 2 songs from the Tragically Hip, although 3 occurred to me. This is from Phantom Power from 1988, a double record. There's a track on here called Fireworks. Now, it starts with a reference to what is arguably the most famous goal ever scored by a Canadian playing hockey. It starts this way. If there's a goal that everyone remembers, now I would say, when he says everyone, certainly everyone in Canada. If you say hockey 1972, they know what you're talking about. It was back in old 72. We all squeezed the stick and we all pulled the trigger, and all I remember is sitting beside you. So it's an interesting introduction to a song where he's referencing that very famous goal and meeting a woman at the same time. So the Summit Series was a series of 8 games played between Canadian hockey players in the NHL under the name of Team Canada versus the Soviet Union. They played 4 games in Canada and 4 games in Moscow. In Canada, the Soviets won 2 games, Canada won 1, 1 was tied, and then they played 4 games in Moscow, and Canada won 3 of the 4, ultimately winning the series. Now, the famous goal he's talking about is in the last minute of the last game, 34 seconds left, Paul Henderson scores the winning goal. So that's been memorialized many times in Canada. It's actually on a coin, I believe, that winning goal. So that's what he's talking about. But the song itself is interesting. It mentions Bobby Orr, for example, but it follows the life of this couple who met when that goal was scored. And it has a kind of a metaphor of the Cold War in there. It's really interesting. I think it's a very well done song from the Tragically Hip. That's one of the records in there. Now, obviously, the Tragically Hip were hockey fans, of course, because they wrote songs about hockey, but they also played hockey. And so I'm going to mention another band that they played hockey with, if you can believe it. So they traveled across the country doing many tours, and 3 times they did a national tour, as I remember, with a band called the Rheostatics. Now, when they were in certain towns together, they would try and find ice time, so they'd call up arenas or universities, whoever had ice. And they would gather together the 2 bands plus a road crew and sometimes fans, and they would play hockey. Now, Gord Downie apparently had an encyclopedic knowledge of hockey. In fact, recently I read an interview with Dave Bedini from the Rheostatics, who talked about Gord Downie's knowledge of hockey. Gord Downie played goalie. So they would play hockey, and it was really kind of cool. So I think the 2 most Canadian bands that we've ever had playing hockey together is so cool. So let's get back to the music here. So the Rheostatics. This is their debut record from 1987 called Greatest Hits, although it's not Greatest Hits. There were only 1,000 copies of this record made. It was released later on compact disc, and I think there was a cassette version, but this is an incredibly difficult record to find. This is when their early days, first record when they were foursome with Dave Bedini, Dave Clark, Martin Tielli, and Tim Vesely. And the song I wanted to mention on here is the third song in side A, called The Ballad of Wendell Clark's Parts 1 and 2. So funny. I would say the Tragically Hip are possibly the most Canadian band ever. And I say that because of the lyrical content. And I would put Rheostatics as number 2 as second most Canadian band ever. Now, you could argue in terms of singers, maybe Gordon Lightfoot. But in terms of bands, yes, I think these 2 are up there. So, The Ballad of Wendell Clark Parts 1 and 2. Now, Wendell Clark was a Toronto Maple Leafs defenseman. Rookie year was 85-86, I think. The song starts off just sort of setting the scene and how mom listens to the radio, dad watches hockey games. And then I heard Wendell talking to Dave Hodge last night, so that's Wendell Clark talking to Dave Hodge. Dave Hodge is a well-known Canadian sports broadcaster, was with Hockey Night in Canada for years. And they mentioned Jacques Plante in this song. Wendell was a man with a stick in his hands who learned how to play in Kelvington, SASK, Saskatchewan. You wish that you'd have died when Wendell has your hide, because he does it in the Canadian way. And it goes on singing about Wendell Clark. So, classic song about Wendell Clark. Just love it. And that ties in perfectly with the last thing I want to talk about, which is this really strange novelty 7-inch record called Clark for Calder. That's Wendell Clark. And the band name is Strong Beliefs, so Leafs, like the Toronto Maple Leafs. This was put out near the end of Wendell Clark's rookie year in the NHL to promote him as the winner for the Calder Memorial Trophy, which is the Rookie of the Year trophy in the NHL. So they put the song out to drum up interest, because it was an award that I think was voted on by journalists and whatnot on Blue Line Records, referencing hockey. Side A has the vocal version. Side B, which features Wendell Clark, has an instrumental version. You can see number 17, Wendell Clark, number 17. The Toronto Maple Leafs retired his number some time ago. So this is just a full-on, vote for Wendell. So it starts with this hockey noises, like crowd noises. There's a hockey announcer on there, and it has this interesting chorus, interesting lyrics about Wendell Clark. So really funny, if you ask me. It didn't work, though, because I think he balloted third in that year. I can't find much about this. There's references to this online. It's on Discogs. The average selling price for one copy was $50. Someone's trying to sell it for $77, if you can believe it. My copy is not in the best of shape. I mean, it plays, but it has some pops and clicks. But I don't know who Strong Beliefs are. There's a songwriter noted here and a producer, but I don't know who they are. So I'd be curious to know more about that. But that's a funny tie-in. So there we have actually 6 songs about hockey. And as I mentioned at the beginning, I left out 2 famous ones. So if you know what they are, I'd be curious if you can figure out what the two that I wish I had. So I'll see you in the next video.